Hello and welcome back to Oro-Oto-Cerebral Pathway. In the embryology series, we are back with second episode of cardiovascular system development, in which we are going to speak about development of the atria. To briefly recapitulate, the cardiac tube formed as a result of fusion of the two endothelial heart tubes shows 4 dilatations because of appearance of 3 constrictions. The dilatations moving from venous end and going towards the arterial end are sinus venosus, atrium, ventricle, and the bulbus cordis. To consider the development of atria, it is imperative to note the development of sinus venosus first. The sinus venosus represents the venous end of the heart tube. In the middle of the 4th week, the sinus venosus receives venous blood from right and left sinus horns. Each horn receives blood from 3 important veins: the vitelline vein or the omphallomesenteric vein, second one the umbilical vein, and third one the common cardinal vein, where the common cardinal vein is bringing venous blood from the body wall, the umbilical vein is bringing it from the placenta, and vitelline vein from structures in the yolk sac. At first, communication between the sinus and atrium is wide, but soon, however, the entrance of sinus shifts to the right because of a lot of hemodynamic changes. This shift is caused primarily by left to right shunts of blood which occur in the venous system during the 4th and 5th weeks of development. With obliteration of right umbilical vein and the left vitelline vein during the 5th week, the left sinus horn rapidly loses its size and importance. When the left common cardinal vein is obliterated at 10 weeks, all that remains of the left sinus horn is the oblique vein of left atrium and the coronary sinus. The sinoatrial orifice, which gradually shifts from center towards the right and becomes a narrow slit, is guarded by 2 valves, the right and the left venous valves. Cranially, these 2 fuse to form septum spurium. At this point of time, we are going to witness septation of the common atrial chamber to form the right and the left atria. So formation of interatrial septum is what we are going to see now. A thin septum called septum primum grows down from the roof of the common atrium due to notching of the roof and ventral wall of the primitive atrium due to pressure from the bulbus cordis. The free edge of this septum primum grows caudally towards the endocardial cushions in the region of AV canal, that is atrioventricular canal. The opening or foramen between the septum primum and the endocardial cushions that are located in the AV canal is known as foramen primum or ostium primum. The endocardial cushions in the region of AV canal develop as 4 mesenchymal proliferations, that is termed superior, inferior, right and left endocardial cushion. The superior and inferior cushions meet and fuse with each other and give rise to a new septum. The new septum, that is septum intermedium, now divides the AV canal into right and left halves. At the very same time, the atrioventricular canal shifts from left towards the center by active remodeling of the myocardium in that region. Soon, the septum primum fuses with the septum intermedium, thus obliterating the ostium primum. So the communication between the right and the left atrium is no more there where it was earlier. But just before fusion, due to programmed cell death, the upper part of the septum primum creates a new opening, which is called foramen secundum. Now there is a reason to maintain communication between the right and the left atria during embryonic life, because the pulmonary circulation is not established, and that's why a lot of blood cannot be shunted to the lungs, so that needs to be short circuited from right heart towards the left heart. That is the reason why there has to be a communication between the right and the left atria. Anyways, coming back. Now, a second septum, septum secundum, develops to the right of the septum primum. The left venous valve and septum spurium fuse with the right side of the septum secundum. This septum, that is septum secundum, in contrast to the thin membranous septum primum, is much more thicker and muscular. It starts growing towards the septum intermedium and overlaps the upper edge of the septum primum, and this creates an obliquely oriented opening called as foramen ovale. Now the blood which has to move from right atrium to the left atrium has to pass through these two foramina. The first foramen is an obliquely oriented foramen ovale, which is located between the lower margin of the septum secundum and upper margin of the septum primum, and consequently the blood column moves through the ostium secundum, which is present in the upper part of septum primum. So the blood first passes through foramen ovale and then passes through the foramen secundum and eventually reaches the left atrium. The region of foramen ovale is made in such a way that it maintains unidirectional flow of blood from right atrium to the left atrium. If the blood tries to come back from the left atrium towards the right atrium, the thin papery septum primum tightly opposes against the thick septum secundum. The foramen ovale will be present throughout the rest of the embryonic life, but soon after birth, due to increase in the left atrial pressure, septum primum and septum secundum fuse, obliterating the foramen ovale. In an adult heart during dissection, when we open the right atrium, we see the septum primum, which is represented by fossa ovalis, and lower margin of the septum secundum is represented by limbus fossa ovalis. So the components of the interatrial septum would be septum primum, septum secundum, septum intermedium, septum spurium, and left venous valve. Developmentally, there are three parts to the right atrium. The posterior smooth part is called sinus venarum. The smooth part of right atrium, which is formed by absorption of the sinus venosus, is the sinus venarum. The auricle or main part of right atrium is the rough anterior part, and it is formed by right half of the primitive atrium. And the third part of the right atrium is the interatrial septum, the development of which we have just now witnessed. The left atrium, a single pulmonary vein sprouts from the posterior left atrial wall and branches into right and left, which again bifurcate to form four pulmonary veins. They are actually supposed to grow towards the lung and anastomose with veins developing in the mesoderm around the bronchial buds so as to be able to bring blood back from the pulmonary vasculature. These pulmonary veins are then absorbed into the left atrium, making the posterior wall of the left atrium smooth. And there are going to be four openings in the posterior wall of the left atrium, and all four of them belong to the pulmonary veins. The posterior smooth part of left atrium is formed by the absorbed part of pulmonary veins. The rough anterior part and the left auricle, on the other hand, is formed from the left half of the primitive atrial chamber. The congenital anomalies commonly seen with the atria are the atrial septal defects, which are abnormalities of formation of the endocardial cushions. To name a few, there is one probe patency of foramen ovale. It is caused by incomplete anatomic fusion of septum primum and septum secundum. It is seen approximately in 25% of the population and usually has no clinical importance. Premature closure of foramen ovale will be the second one. Is a closure of foramen ovale during prenatal life, and it results in hypertrophy of the right side of the heart and underdevelopment of the left side of the heart. The next one would be a septum primum defect or a septum secundum defect, formed as a result of failure of formation or excessive reabsorption of the septum. There is a more severe anomaly called common atrium, that is cor triloculare biventriculare, where there is a complete failure of septum primum and septum secundum formation, and this results in a condition in which there is formation of only one atrium, that is a common atrial chamber. Well, that's development of the atria for you. Happy learning.